The scrape of metal on frozen asphalt echoed through the darkness as I made another pass down Maple Ridge Drive, my plow blade sending walls of white powder to either side of the street. It was 4:15 in the morning, the temperature hovering around -8 degrees, and I had already been at this for 2 hours. Most people were still asleep in their warm beds, completely unaware that 18 inches of snow had buried our suburban Denver neighborhood while they dreamed. I had bought the heavy-duty plow attachment for my F-250 3 years ago, right after moving into the Evergreen Hills subdivision in Aurora, Colorado. The neighborhood was beautiful, with tree-lined streets and well-maintained homes, but it sat at the base of a series of hills that made winter driving treacherous. The city plows always hit the main roads first, and our residential streets could go days without attention during major storms. As someone who worked in emergency medical supply distribution, I could not afford to be snowed in when hospitals needed deliveries. What started as a practical investment for my own driveway had evolved into something more. I genuinely enjoyed plowing. There was something meditative about being out in the pre-dawn darkness, watching the accumulation disappear behind my truck, knowing I was helping my neighbors get to work safely. I never asked for payment. I never made a big deal about it. I just did it. The storm had rolled in around midnight, one of those late February blizzards that the Front Range is famous for. I had been monitoring the weather all week, watching the predictions climb from 6 inches to 12 to 18. When I woke at 2 in the morning to use the bathroom and saw the white wall outside my window, I knew what needed to be done. I had dressed in layers, fired up the truck, and started with my own driveway before working my way through the subdivision's main arteries. My headlights cut through the swirling snow as I turned onto Birch Lane, making my third circuit through the neighborhood. Most of the streets were passable now, with clear lanes down the center and navigable access to driveways. I was just finishing up, thinking about heading home for hot coffee and maybe a few hours of sleep before my shift started at 9, when I saw the red and blue lights in my rearview mirror. My stomach dropped. I pulled over to the side of the street I had just cleared, putting the truck in park but leaving the engine running. The sheriff's department cruiser eased in behind me, and I watched in my side mirror as a deputy climbed out. He was bundled in a heavy coat, his breath visible in the frigid air as he approached my window. I rolled it down, letting in a blast of cold air. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" The deputy was young, maybe late 20s, with a friendly face that looked slightly apologetic. His name tag read Morrison. "Morning. I am going to need to see your license and registration, please." "Sure thing." I retrieved both from my wallet and glove box, handing them over. "Can I ask what this is about?" Deputy Morrison examined my documents with his flashlight. "We received a noise complaint. Someone called about a truck with a plow disturbing the peace at an unreasonable hour." He looked up at me, and I could see he was trying to keep his expression neutral. "Xavier Vance, you live on Maple Ridge Drive." "That's right. 4 houses down from where we are now." He handed back my documents. "Mr. Vance, I understand you are trying to help out, but residential noise ordinances prohibit this kind of activity before 7 in the morning. You will need to shut it down for tonight." I stared at him, genuinely confused. "I have been doing this for 3 years. I have plowed after every major storm, usually starting around 2 or 3 in the morning to get ahead of it. No one has ever complained before." "Well, someone is complaining now." Morrison shifted his weight, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Look, between you and me, I think it is ridiculous. I live over in the Meadowbrook neighborhood, and I would love it if someone cleared our streets before dawn, but I have got to respond to the complaint. Who called it in?" I cannot disclose that information, but it came through the HOA president. She contacted dispatch directly and insisted we send someone out. The HOA. Of course. I should have known. Evergreen Hills had a homeowners association, like most suburban developments built in the last 20 years. For the first couple of years I lived here, it had been relatively benign. They maintained the common areas, organized an annual summer barbecue, and sent out the occasional reminder about garbage can placement. Then, about 8 months ago, the board had been taken over by a new president named Patricia Carmichael. Patricia was everything the stereotype promised. She was a 52-year-old woman with an aggressive blonde bob, designer athleisure, where that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and the kind of perpetual expression that suggested she was constantly smelling something unpleasant. She lived in one of the larger homes on the hill with her husband Gerald, who I had seen maybe twice in 8 months. Rumor was he traveled constantly for work, possibly just to avoid his wife. Since taking over the HOA, Patricia had been on a mission to enforce every petty rule in the covenant documents and invent new ones where gaps existed. She had sent violation notices to people for leaving basketball hoops at the end of driveways, for Christmas lights being up past January 10th, for lawn ornaments that were not tasteful enough, for cars parked on the street overnight. She had tried to implement a rule requiring all homes to repaint their front doors the same shade of colonial black. She had attempted to ban any dogs over 40 pounds from the neighborhood park. Most people ignored her when they could and grudgingly complied when they could not. I had managed to avoid her attention so far, mostly by keeping to myself and maintaining my property in a way that gave her no ammunition. Apparently, my luck had run out. "I am happy to speak with Mrs. Carmichael about this," I said carefully. "But with all due respect, Deputy, people need to get to work in a few hours. The city will not get to these residential streets until tomorrow at the earliest. I am not charging anyone. I am just trying to help." Morrison nodded, and I could see the sympathy in his eyes. "I get it. I really do. But the law is the law. If she wants to push this, she can file for a restraining order to prevent you from plowing, claim it is harassment or property damage or something equally stupid." He sighed heavily. "Honestly, Mr. Vance, your best bet is to talk to the HOA, get their permission in writing. Otherwise, my hands are tied if we get another call." "Understood. I will shut it down for tonight. I appreciate your cooperation." He started to turn away, then paused. "Hey, just so you know, you cleared my route home. I live out past the subdivision, and I have been dreading the drive after my shift ends at 6. You just saved me about an hour of white-knuckle driving." He gave me a genuine smile. "So, thank you. Seriously. What you are doing is a good thing, even if one miserable person does not appreciate it." That small validation helped take some of the sting out of being stopped, but I was still frustrated as I watched him drive away. I made one more pass to finish the street I was on, then headed home. By the time I parked the truck in my garage, it was nearly 5 in the morning. I was too angry to sleep, so I made coffee and stood at my kitchen window, watching the sky gradually lighten and the neighborhood wake up. People emerged to shovel their driveways and brush off their cars. I saw them looking around in surprise at the cleared streets, talking to each other over hedges and across yards. My next-door neighbor, an elderly man named Robert Chen, waved at me through the window with a grateful thumbs up. He had seen me plowing in the past, and always left a tin of homemade cookies in my mailbox after big storms. His wife Helen had severe arthritis, and he had confided once that my plowing was the difference between her getting to her physical therapy appointments or having to cancel. Around 8:30, after I had showered and dressed for work, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Robert standing there, looking distressed. "Xander, did something happen with your plowing this morning? Helen and I heard a rumor that the sheriff was called on you." I nodded grimly. Patricia Carmichael filed a noise complaint. Deputy showed up around 4:30 and told me to shut it down. Robert's face flushed with anger. "That woman is unbelievable. Does she not realize what you have been doing for this neighborhood? Half the people here would not be able to get to work today without you. Apparently, I am violating the noise ordinance by operating heavy equipment before 7 in the morning. That is absurd. You are plowing streets, not hosting a rock concert." Robert shook his head. "Helen and I are going to the next HOA meeting to speak on your behalf. This is ridiculous." "I appreciate that, but do not put yourself in her crosshairs. You know how she is. Let her come after us. We have been in this neighborhood for 20 years, long before she showed up with her clipboard and her attitude." He patted my arm. "You are a good man, Xander. Do not let her take that away from you." I headed to work feeling emotionally drained despite the coffee. My job at Alpine Medical Supply was usually straightforward, managing inventory and coordinating deliveries to hospitals and clinics throughout the Denver metro area. But I could not focus. I kept thinking about Patricia Carmichael sitting in her warm house, watching me plow through her window, and deciding that helping our neighbors was somehow a violation worth reporting. Around lunchtime, I received an email. It was from the Evergreen Hills HOA, sent to what appeared to be the entire neighborhood mailing list. "Dear residents," it began. "It has come to the attention of the board that unauthorized snow removal activities have been taking place in our subdivision during prohibited hours. While we appreciate community spirit, we must insist that all residents comply with noise ordinances and HOA regulations. Heavy equipment operation, including but not limited to snow plows, is prohibited between the hours of 10 o'clock p.m. and 7 o'clock a.m. Violations will be reported to the appropriate authorities. Please be respectful of your neighbors. Regards, Patricia Carmichael, HOA President." I read it 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each pass. The way it was worded made me sound like a nuisance, someone selfishly disrupting the peace rather than providing a service. There was no acknowledgement of what I had actually been doing or why. My phone started buzzing with text messages. Several neighbors reached out to express their support and frustration with Patricia's email. A woman named Jennifer Blackwell from Oakmont Circle said she was a lawyer and would be happy to review the HOA covenants to see if Patricia actually had the authority she claimed. A man named Tom Pierce said he had been considering buying a plow himself and volunteered to split the work with me if we could figure out a way around Patricia's restrictions. But there were also messages that concerned me. A few neighbors mentioned that Patricia had been going door to door that afternoon, clipboard in hand, collecting signatures for something. No one seemed to know exactly what, but it did not sound good. I got home around 6 that evening to find a certified letter stuck in my door. My hands were shaking slightly as I opened it. It was a formal notice from the HOA informing me that I was in violation of Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the Community Covenants regarding commercial activity. It claimed that my snow plowing constituted an unlicensed business operation within the subdivision, and that I was required to cease immediately or face fines of $250 per occurrence. I sat down hard on my couch, reading the letter twice more. Commercial activity. I had never charged a single person, never asked for anything in return. How could they possibly classify this as a business? I called Jennifer Blackwell, the lawyer who had texted earlier. She picked up on the second ring. "Jennifer, this is Xavier Vance." I am sorry to bother you, but I just received a certified letter from the HOA and I could really use some advice. Let me guess. Patricia is claiming your plowing is a commercial operation. How did you know? Because she knocked on my door this afternoon with a petition trying to get signatures to ban you from plowing. I told her where she could stick her petition. Jennifer's voice was sharp with anger. I also told her that I would be reviewing the covenants myself to ensure she was not overstepping her authority. Send me a photo of that letter. I snapped a picture and texted it to her. I heard her phone chime on the other end, then silence as she read. "Okay, this is garbage," she said finally. Section 7. Paragraph 3 is about running actual businesses out of your home. Things like operating a daycare, a dog grooming salon, a law office. It is meant to prevent commercial traffic and activity that would disrupt the residential character of the neighborhood. You are not running a business. You are not charging anyone. You are not generating traffic. This is a gross misinterpretation of the covenant language. Can she fine me anyway? She can try, but you do not have to pay, and I would strongly recommend you do not. If she wants to take you to court over it, let her. No judge is going to uphold this. Jennifer paused. But Xander, I have to warn you, people like Patricia do not back down easily. If you fight this, she is going to escalate. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Robert and Helen, about the deputy thanking me for clearing his route, about all the neighbors who had reached out today to offer support. Yes, I am not going to let her bully me into stopping something that helps people. Good. Then here is what we are going to do. First, I am going to draft a response to this letter, citing the actual covenant language and explaining why her interpretation is incorrect. Second, we are going to gather testimony from neighbors about how your plowing has helped them. Third, we are going to show up at the next HOA meeting in force and demand that the board reverse this decision. When is the next meeting? 2 weeks from now. Thursday, March 13th at 7 p.m. in the community center. Be there, and tell everyone who supports you to be there too. I spent the next 2 weeks on edge, waiting for the next shoe to drop. Patricia did not disappoint. 4 days after the certified letter, I received another notice, this time claiming that my plow blade had damaged common area property, specifically a decorative rock border along Maple Ridge Drive. She included a grainy photo that appeared to show some displaced rocks and demanded reimbursement of $800 for repairs. I drove out to the location immediately and took my own photos. The rocks in question were along a stretch I had not even plowed because it was near the subdivision entrance, which the city had already cleared. The damage looked like it had been caused by the city's industrial plows, not my truck. I sent my photos to Jennifer, who added them to her growing file. The harassment continued. Patricia sent me a violation notice for parking my truck on the street overnight, even though I had parked it in my garage. When I pointed this out, she claimed the notice was for a different night and provided no evidence. She sent another notice claiming my garbage cans were visible from the street outside of collection hours. I had security camera footage showing they were in my garage. It was obvious what she was doing. She was trying to bury me in paperwork and fines, hoping I would either give up or lose my temper and give her grounds for a legitimate complaint. I refused to take the bait. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was becoming increasingly polarized. Most people supported me, but Patricia had her allies. There was a group of 3 or 4 households, mostly clustered near her house on the hill, who seemed to echo whatever she said. They started parking their cars in ways that made streets harder to plow. One of them, a man named Clifford Brennan, actually stood in his driveway one morning shouting at me that I was trespassing when I plowed the public street in front of his house. The night before the HOA meeting, I barely slept. I had prepared a statement, gathered my photos and documentation, and Jennifer had assembled a legal brief that thoroughly dismantled Patricia's claims. But I was still nervous. Public confrontation was not something I enjoyed, and I knew Patricia would not go down without a fight. The community center was packed when I arrived at 6:45. The meeting room, which normally held maybe 20 people comfortably, had at least 60 residents crammed in, with more standing in the hallway. I saw Robert and Helen Chen sitting in the front row, along with Jennifer Blackwell, Tom Pierce, and dozens of other familiar faces from the neighborhood. On the opposite side of the room, Patricia Carmichael sat at a folding table with 2 other board members, looking imperious in a crisp white blouse and statement necklace. The meeting was called to order at 7 sharp. Patricia ran through some routine business items first, approving the minutes from the last meeting, discussing landscaping bids for the common areas. Her voice was clipped and officious, and she kept glancing at the crowd with barely concealed annoyance. Finally, she reached the agenda item everyone was waiting for. Next, we need to address the ongoing issue of unauthorized snow removal operations within the subdivision. Jennifer stood up immediately. "Madam President, I would like to speak on this matter." Patricia's jaw tightened. Residents will have an opportunity to comment after the board has presented its position. With respect, I am speaking as legal counsel for Mr. Vance, and I believe you will want to hear what I have to say before you proceed further. The room went completely silent. Patricia looked like she wanted to refuse, but the other 2 board members were shifting uncomfortably, clearly aware that they were treading on dangerous ground. "Fine. You have 3 minutes." Jennifer stepped forward, holding a folder full of documents. "The board has accused Mr. Vance of violating Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the Community Covenants regarding commercial activity. However, a plain reading of that section makes clear it applies only to ongoing business operations conducted from a residence. Mr. Vance is not running a business. He is not charging fees. He is not advertising services. He is not generating commercial traffic. He is performing a voluntary community service at his own expense and on his own time. Attempting to apply this covenant section to his actions is not only incorrect, it is arguably a bad faith interpretation designed to harass a homeowner for engaging in neighborly conduct." Patricia's face was turning red. "He is using heavy equipment in violation of noise ordinances." The noise ordinance you cited applies to construction activity and entertainment. Snow removal is specifically exempted as a necessary service, particularly during emergencies. 18 inches of snow that makes roads impassable qualifies as an emergency. Jennifer pulled out another document. "I have also obtained statements from 43 households in this subdivision, expressing their support for Mr. Vance's plowing and confirming that it has never disturbed their peace or caused them any harm. In contrast, you have provided no evidence that anyone other than yourself has actually been bothered by this activity. I do not need to provide evidence. I am the president of this HOA, and I have the authority to enforce our rules. Actually, you do not have unilateral authority. According to the HOA bylaws, major enforcement actions require a majority vote of the full board. Did you consult with the other board members before sending those violation notices and fine letters?" Patricia glanced at the 2 other board members, a nervous-looking man named Stuart Gomez and a middle-aged woman named Deanne Fuller. Both of them looked distinctly uncomfortable. Stuart cleared his throat. "Patricia mentioned there was a complaint, but we did not vote on any enforcement action." Jennifer nodded. "Which means those notices and fines have no legal standing. Mr. Vance is not obligated to pay them, and if the HOA attempts to place a lien on his property over these bogus fines, he will have grounds to sue the association for harassment and abuse of authority. The room erupted in applause. Patricia was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. This is not a trial. We are here to discuss community standards and quality of life. An elderly woman in the third row stood up. My quality of life is a lot better when I can actually get my car out of my driveway, Patricia. Maybe you do not care about that because you do not work, but some of us have jobs. I work very hard managing this association, Patricia shot back. You mean harassing people over nonsense? Tom Pierce was on his feet now. You have sent violation notices to half the neighborhood in the last 6 months. My wife got one for planting flowers that were the wrong color. The wrong color. They were pink instead of red. Who has time to police flower colors? More people started talking at once, and the meeting descended into chaos. Patricia tried to restore order by banging a gavel, but no one was listening anymore. Neighbors were standing up to share their own stories of Patricia's petty tyranny, from being fined for dog breeds to being told their children's playground equipment was not aesthetically pleasing enough. Finally, Stuart Gomez held up his hands. Enough. Everyone, please. We need to take a formal vote. He turned to Patricia. I move that we rescind all violation notices and fines issued to Mr. Vance, and formally acknowledge that his snow removal activities are not in violation of any HOA rules or community covenants. Diane Fuller immediately seconded the motion. Patricia looked like she had been slapped. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. We are volunteers, Patricia. We are supposed to be making this neighborhood better, not worse. All you have done since taking over is make people miserable. Stuart's voice was steady but firm. I vote yes on the motion. Yes, said Deanne. All eyes turned to Patricia. For a moment I thought she might actually walk out, but she just sat there, her lips pressed into a thin line. No, motion carries 2-1, Stuart announced. Mr. Vance, on behalf of the board, I apologize for this mess. You are welcome to continue plowing, and we appreciate your service to the community. The applause this time was deafening. I felt a wave of relief so intense it was almost physical. Jennifer gave me a satisfied smile and collected her documents. But I should have known it would not end there. 3 days later, I was plowing after another significant snowfall, this one dropping about 7 inches overnight. It was not as massive as the February storm, but it was enough to make driving difficult. I was working my way down Oakmont Circle around 5:30 in the morning when I saw Patricia standing in her driveway, filming me with her phone. I ignored her and kept working. When I made the turn at the end of the cul-de-sac and headed back, she was standing in the middle of the street, directly in my path. I stopped the truck and rolled down my window. Mrs. Carmichael, you need to move. This is not safe. You are trespassing, she said loudly, still filming. I am documenting your harassment and property destruction. I am plowing a public street. Please step aside. These are not public streets. They are private roads maintained by the HOA, which means you need permission to be here with that equipment. I had researched this after the meeting, knowing she might try something like this. Actually, according to the county records, all streets within the subdivision are dedicated public right-of-ways. The HOA maintains them by agreement, but they are legally public. Now please move. I will not be bullied by you. I took a deep breath, counting to 10. I am calling the sheriff's department to report that you are blocking the road. You can move on your own, or you can explain to them why you are standing in the middle of a street in the dark during a snowstorm. That finally made her step aside, but the look she gave me was pure venom. As I drove past, I could see her still filming, her mouth moving rapidly as she narrated her version of events to her phone. The next morning, I woke up to find my truck had been vandalized. Someone had carved the word criminal into the paint on my driver's side door with something sharp, leaving deep gouges in the metal. They had also slashed 2 of my tires and poured something sticky all over my windshield. I stood in my garage staring at the damage, feeling my hands shake with anger. I called the sheriff's department and filed a report. The deputy who responded was not Morrison, but an older woman named Sergeant Ramirez who took detailed photos and notes. "You have any idea who might have done this?" I explained the situation with Patricia Carmichael and the HOA. Ramirez's expression grew more serious as I talked. "Did you happen to have any security cameras that might have caught the perpetrator?" "No, my cameras cover my front door and backyard, but not the garage interior." "What about neighbors?" I thought about it. My next-door neighbor Robert had a camera system, but it faced his own property. However, the house across the street, owned by a young couple named David and Melissa Torres, had a camera with a wide angle that might have caught someone approaching my driveway. David pulled up the footage for us. At 2:37 in the morning, a figure dressed in dark clothes and wearing a ski mask had walked up my driveway, disappeared into the garage for approximately 4 minutes, then hurried away back up the street toward the hill where Patricia lived. The video was too grainy to make a positive identification, but the person's build and gait looked female. "I am going to pay Mrs. Carmichael a visit," Ramirez said. "In the meantime, get an estimate for repairs. If we can prove she did this, she will be paying for it." Repairs ended up costing $2,200. My insurance would cover most of it after the deductible, but I was still out $500 plus my premium would probably increase. More than the money, though, I was disturbed by the escalation. Sending nasty letters was one thing. Destroying property was something else entirely. Sergeant Ramirez came by 2 days later to update me. I interviewed Mrs. Carmichael. She denies any involvement and claims she was home asleep at the time of the incident. Her husband corroborates her alibi, though he admitted he was asleep and cannot actually confirm her whereabouts. "So that is it. She gets away with it." I did not say that. I also obtained a warrant for her phone records and found some interesting text messages. Ramirez pulled out a notepad. "She has been communicating with several other residents about you, using language that could be construed as soliciting criminal activity. Phrases like someone needs to make him understand he is not welcome, and he needs to learn there are consequences. Nothing explicitly stating she wanted someone to vandalize your truck, but enough to establish a pattern of hostility. Is that enough to charge her? Not yet, but I am not done investigating. I have also learned that she filed a false police report last week, claiming you threatened her during the confrontation on Oakmont Circle. I reviewed the dash camera from Deputy Morrison's patrol unit since he was in the area that morning and drove past during the incident. The footage clearly shows you remained in your truck and she approached you, not the other way around. Filing a false report is a crime." My eyebrows went up. "She actually filed charges against me," she tried. The deputy she spoke with did not file them because her story did not make sense and had no evidence, but she definitely made the attempt, and there is a record of it. Ramirez fixed me with a steady look. "Mr. Vance, I have been doing this job for 19 years and I have dealt with HOA disputes before. Usually they are petty but harmless. This woman seems to have crossed a line from annoying into potentially dangerous. I want you to be careful, vary your schedule, keep your doors locked. If she approaches you, do not engage, just call us." That conversation left me deeply unsettled. I had dealt with difficult people before, but no one who seemed quite this unhinged. I took Ramirez's advice seriously and installed additional security cameras covering my garage and driveway. The following week, the HOA held an emergency meeting. Stuart Gomez had sent out an email explaining that the board needed to address concerns about Patricia's leadership and conduct. The email was diplomatically worded, but the implication was clear. They were considering removing her as president. I debated whether to attend. Part of me wanted to stay out of it and let the board handle things internally. But Jennifer Blackwell convinced me I should be there in case Patricia tried to spin some new narrative about me. The community center was packed again, though the atmosphere was different this time. Instead of the energized anger from the last meeting, there was a sense of grim determination. People were tired of the drama. They just wanted their neighborhood back. Patricia arrived exactly at 7, walking in with her head high and her signature clipboard clutched to her chest. She took her seat at the board table and stared straight ahead, not acknowledging anyone. Stuart called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming. The board has called this emergency session to address serious concerns about the president's conduct and whether she should continue in that role. Before we proceed to discussion and a vote, Mrs. Carmichael will have an opportunity to address the community." Patricia stood up, and I braced myself for whatever was coming. "I have served this community faithfully for 8 months," she began, her voice tight with emotion. "I have worked tirelessly to maintain property values and ensure that our neighborhood remains a place we can be proud of. But I have been undermined at every turn by people who do not respect rules or order, people who think they can do whatever they want without consequences." Her eyes found me in the crowd. "That man has been operating heavy machinery at all hours, disturbing the peace, damaging property, and when I tried to enforce our community standards, he launched a campaign to harass and intimidate me." Jennifer stood up. "That is a lie and you know it." "You are not recognized," Patricia snapped. "I have the floor. This neighborhood has turned against me because I dared to hold people accountable. You have all been manipulated by someone who presents himself as a good Samaritan, but is really just seeking attention and control. Well, I will not stand by and watch everything I have worked for be destroyed. If you want to remove me as president, fine. But you will regret it when property values decline, and this subdivision becomes known as the place where anything goes." She sat down abruptly, her face flushed. The room was dead silent. Stuart sighed heavily. "Thank you, Mrs. Carmichael. Would anyone else like to speak?" Robert Chen stood up, leaning on his cane. "I have lived in this neighborhood for 20 years. I have seen 5 different HOA presidents come and go. Some were better than others, but none of them ever made me feel unwelcome in my own home. Patricia, you have sent me 4 violation notices in 8 months. One was for having a garden gnome that you said was tacky. My late mother gave me that gnome before she passed away. Another was for having a wreath on my door past January 15th. One was for my trash cans being visible from the street when they were in my garage. You have made my wife cry with your constant criticism and threats of fines. We are good people. We maintain our property. We pay our dues. We do not deserve to be treated like criminals." An older man in the back stood next. "She sent my daughter a notice saying her car was parked illegally on the street. My daughter was visiting from California for 3 days. 3 days. A woman with a toddler on her hip. She told me my son's birthday decorations were up too long. It was 2 days after his party." One by one, people stood and shared their stories. The picture that emerged was of someone who had systematically targeted dozens of residents over petty, often imaginary violations. By the time the testimony ended, even Patricia's few allies looked uncomfortable. Stuart called for a vote. All in favor of removing Patricia Carmichael as HOA president, please raise your hand. Every hand in the room went up except for Patricia's and two others. Even Diane Fuller, who had been relatively quiet, voted yes. The motion carries. Mrs. Carmichael, effective immediately, you are removed as president. We ask that you turn over all HOA documents, keys, and access credentials to me by the end of this week. Patricia stood up, trembling with rage. You are all fools, every single one of you. This neighborhood is going to fall apart without proper leadership, and when it does, do not come crying to me. She grabbed her clipboard and purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The room erupted in relieved chatter. Stewart raised his voice to be heard. I will serve as interim president until we can hold proper elections next month. In the meantime, I promise we will get back to what an HOA is supposed to do. Maintain common areas, organize community events, and generally stay out of everyone's way as much as possible. That got a laugh and a round of applause. I thought that would be the end of it. Patricia had been removed from power. She had no more authority to send violation notices or file complaints. I could go back to plowing in peace, and she could go back to whatever it was she did with her time when she was not harassing neighbors. But I underestimated her capacity for vindictiveness. 2 weeks later, another major storm hit. This one was a wet, heavy snow that started Friday afternoon and continued through Saturday morning, accumulating about 14 inches. I waited until it stopped around 3 in the morning, then fired up the truck and got to work. I had been plowing for about an hour when I noticed something odd. As I approached the intersection of Maple Ridge Drive and Oakmont Circle, I saw what looked like a pile of debris in the middle of the street. I slowed down to investigate and realized someone had deliberately created an obstacle course of trash cans, construction materials, and large rocks dragged from landscaping borders. I got out to move the debris and immediately saw the wire. Someone had strung a heavy cable across the street at bumper height, tied between 2 trees on either side. If I had hit it at speed with the plow, it could have caused serious damage to my truck or injured me. I felt a cold rage settle over me. This was not vandalism. This was a deliberate attempt to cause me harm. I called the sheriff's department immediately. Sergeant Ramirez responded along with Deputy Morrison. They documented everything, taking photos and measurements. The cable setup was sophisticated enough that it could not have been done quickly or impulsively. Someone had planned this. We are going to Mrs. Carmichael's house right now, Ramirez said. This crosses way over the line. I followed them in my truck, my heart pounding. When we pulled up to Patricia's large house on the hill, the lights were all off. Ramirez rang the doorbell multiple times before a light finally flicked on upstairs. Gerald Carmichael answered the door in a bathrobe, looking confused and exhausted. What is this about? We need to speak with your wife, Mr. Carmichael. Patricia is not here. She left yesterday afternoon and I have not heard from her since. Ramirez and Morrison exchanged glances. Do you know where she went? She said she was going to stay with her sister in Colorado Springs for a few days. She has been very upset since the HOA meeting. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Look, I know my wife has been causing problems. I have tried to talk to her about it, but she will not listen. She became obsessed with this neighborhood and running the HOA. I barely recognize her anymore. We need to come in and look around, Mr. Carmichael. We have reason to believe your wife may have been involved in a serious crime tonight. Gerald looked shocked but stepped aside. Of course, whatever you need. I waited outside while they searched. It took about 20 minutes before Ramirez came back out, holding an evidence bag. Inside was a coil of the same type of cable that had been strung across the street, along with what looked like a handwritten plan sketched on notebook paper. We found this in her home office. The drawing matches the setup exactly. There are also printed satellite photos of the intersection with measurements. Ramirez's expression was grim. "Mr. Vance, I am going to be honest with you. This is now a criminal investigation for reckless endangerment at minimum, possibly attempted assault. I am issuing a warrant for Mrs. Carmichael's arrest." The next 48 hours were surreal. The story spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Patricia's sister in Colorado Springs confirmed that Patricia had arrived Friday evening and had been with her the whole time, which meant she must have set up the cable trap Friday afternoon before leaving town, calculating that I would be out plowing Saturday morning. The Colorado Springs police located Patricia at her sister's house and took her into custody. She was extradited back to Aurora and formally charged with reckless endangerment, criminal mischief, and filing a false police report. Her bail was set at $10,000. Gerald Carmichael came to my house Sunday evening, looking like he had aged 10 years in 2 days. "Mr. Vance, I owe you an apology. I had no idea things had gotten this bad. I have been traveling constantly for work, trying to avoid the situation at home, and I let it get completely out of control. This is not your fault, Mr. Carmichael. Please call me Gerald, and it is partly my fault. I knew Patricia was becoming obsessive. I should have insisted she get help. Instead, I just escaped to business trips and pretended everything was fine." He shook his head. "I have retained a lawyer for her, but I have also contacted a divorce attorney for myself. I cannot live like this anymore." I felt a pang of sympathy for him despite everything. "I am sorry it came to this. I am sorry you got caught in the middle of it. For what it is worth, I think what you have been doing for the neighborhood is wonderful. When I am home during storms, I always feel better knowing you are out there making the streets safe." He handed me an envelope. "This is a check for the damage to your truck and to cover your deductible. It is the least I can do. Gerald, you do not have to do this." "Yes, I do, please. Let me do something right for once." I accepted the check, more because I could see he needed to do it than because I needed the money. The legal process moved slowly, as it always does. Patricia was released on bail and ordered to stay away from me and the subdivision. She and Gerald separated, and she moved in with her sister. The HOA held elections, and Stewart was officially voted in as president, with Jennifer Blackwell joining the board as vice president. Spring came, and with it a sense of normalcy returning to Evergreen Hills. People were friendly again, organizing barbecues and play dates for their kids. The petty violation notices stopped. I continued plowing when needed, though spring snowstorms are less frequent than winter ones. Patricia's trial was scheduled for June. The prosecutor offered her a plea deal. Plead guilty to reckless endangerment and criminal mischief, accept a suspended sentence with 2 years probation, pay restitution, and agree to a permanent restraining order keeping her away from me and the subdivision. If she rejected the deal and went to trial, she faced up to 4 years in prison if convicted on all charges. She took the deal. I attended the sentencing hearing, not because I wanted to see her punished, but because I felt like I needed closure. Patricia looked smaller somehow, diminished in her plain gray suit with her hair pulled back simply. She read a prepared statement apologizing for her actions and claiming that stress and mental health issues had caused her to lose perspective. I do not know if she meant it or if her lawyer had written it, but she sounded sincere enough. The judge accepted the plea deal but added a provision requiring Patricia to undergo mental health counseling as part of her probation. Mrs. Carmichael, The court recognizes that you have no prior criminal record and that you appear to have been dealing with issues that affected your judgment. However, your actions were serious and could have resulted in significant harm. You will be on probation for 2 years. If you violate any terms of your probation or the restraining order, you will serve the full 4-year sentence. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. And that was that. Patricia Carmichael was led out of the courtroom, and I never saw her again. Life in Evergreen Hills returned to normal, or at least as normal as suburban life gets. I continued plowing after storms, though I invested in some better lighting for my truck and always made sure to check for obstacles before each pass. Deputy Morrison transferred to a different shift, but always waved when I saw him around town. Sergeant Ramirez stopped by occasionally to check in and make sure I was not having any more problems. The neighborhood organized a formal thank you event for me in July, which was embarrassing but touching. They presented me with a plaque that read, "Xavier Vance, Evergreen Hills Snow Hero, in appreciation for your service to our community." Robert and Helen brought enough homemade cookies to feed everyone. Stuart gave a speech about how communities are built on people who give without expecting anything in return, and how what I had done was more than just plowing snow. It was reminding everyone that neighbors should look out for each other. I am not great with emotions, so I just thanked everyone and promised I would be ready when the next winter storm hit. Gerald Carmichael's divorce was finalized in August. He came by one last time before moving out of the neighborhood, downsizing to a condo closer to his work. "I am sorry again for everything," he said, "but I wanted to thank you for how you handled it. You could have pressed for harsher charges or made things worse. You showed a lot of grace. I just wanted it to be over. Still, you are a good man, Xander." He shook my hand firmly. "Take care of this place. It is a good neighborhood, and it is better with you in it." As I write this, it is late January, almost a year since the 4 in the morning deputy visit that started everything. We have had 3 significant snowstorms so far this winter, and I have plowed after each one. No one has complained. In fact, I have had neighbors leave thermoses of coffee in their mailboxes for me, which I always find when I finish a route. Tom Pierce did buy his own plow attachment and sometimes joins me, cutting our work time in half. The HOA is boring now in the best possible way. They maintain the common areas, send out reminders about the annual meeting, and leave people alone. Stuart jokes that his primary qualification for president is being too lazy to micromanage everyone's lives. I think about Patricia Carmichael sometimes, wondering how someone gets to a place where they are so consumed by the need for control that they are willing to destroy their own life and hurt others. I hope the counseling helped her. I hope she found some peace. But mostly, I do not think about her at all anymore. What I think about is this. I wake up in the dark on storm mornings, make my coffee, and head out into the snow. I watch the neighborhood streets transform from impassable to clear. I see lights flicking on in houses as people wake up, and I know they will be able to get to work, get their kids to school, get to their doctor's appointments. I know Robert and Helen can make it to physical therapy. I know the young mother on Birch Lane can get her daughter to daycare. And sometimes, I pass a sheriff's department cruiser on my way home, and the deputy waves or flashes their lights in thanks, and I remember Morrison telling me I had cleared his route home. That is what makes it worth it. Not recognition or thanks, though those are nice, but the simple knowledge that I can do something useful, something that makes life a little easier for the people around me. That is enough. Last week, a new family moved into Gerald Carmichael's old house. They have 2 young kids and a golden retriever. I introduced myself, and the husband, whose name is Marcus, mentioned they had moved from Florida and were nervous about their first real winter. I told him not to worry, that the neighborhood looks out for each other, and that I would make sure the streets stayed clear. His wife Amber smiled with visible relief. "That is so kind of you. Everyone we have met here has been so welcoming. We already love it. That is what Evergreen Hills is now, a place where people are kind, where neighbors help each other, where you can plow snow at 4 in the morning and know that you are making a difference." The other morning, I was finishing up after a smaller storm, maybe 4 inches that had fallen overnight. It was about 6, just starting to get light, when I saw a kid who could not have been more than 7 or 8 standing at the end of his driveway in his pajamas and snow boots. He waved at me enthusiastically as I drove past, and I waved back. His father came out a moment later, probably wondering where his son had gone, and when he saw the cleared street, he gave me a thumbs up and called out, "Thank you." Such a small moment, so ordinary, but it reminded me why I do this, because this is what community is supposed to be. Not rules and restrictions and people trying to control each other. Just people living their lives, helping when they can, and appreciating when someone helps them. I still have the violation notices Patricia sent me, filed away in a folder in my office. I keep them not because I am holding on to anger, but as a reminder. A reminder that standing up for what is right matters, that not everyone will appreciate you trying to help, but that is okay. That sometimes doing good means dealing with people who want to stop you, and you have to be willing to push through that. Most mornings, I finish plowing just as the sun is coming up, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. I park my truck in the garage, hang up my coat, and pour another cup of coffee. I stand at my kitchen window and watch the neighborhood come to life, ready for whatever the day brings, and when the next storm hits, I will be ready too. Ready to fire up the truck, drop the blade, and head out into the dark. Ready to clear the roads, ready to help my neighbors, ready to do the right thing no matter what, because that is what you do when you are part of a community. You show up, you do the work, you help people. And if you are really lucky, every once in a while, a sheriff's deputy pulls you over at 4 in the morning just to say thank you for clearing his route home.